In this week's video, I'm capturing some evening long exposures showing how I take and edit shots just like these. Absolutely love this view because we've just got both of these bridges. We've got the road bridge arcing its way over, which acts as a really nice frame for the iconic fourth bridge, the red one in the distance, and then having this really great foreground interest too just brings this whole scene together. But also in the sky at the moment, as you can see, we've got dark blue sky and we've got these white fluffy clouds moving across them. So by doing a nice long exposure, we're going to get that lovely blurred motion of the clouds moving away over the sky behind the bridges, and I think that's going to look really, really great in this scene. So the main composition I'm going for actually involves having the camera quite low, which is a little difficult to see what I'm doing because I'm shooting on this side of the fence because I can't stand on here, but I'm sure it's fine just with my tripod. But the reason I want to get low is because we really make use of these big blocks of concrete and this ironwork as foreground interest. It really minimizes sort of a distance between these rocks and the bridges, which is going to allow for, hopefully, although I can't quite see, a much nicer composition because I don't want too much water in between them. I want it to be quite neat and compact through the middle. But I definitely want this to be a really long exposure, so I've got my 10 stop neutral density filter on the front. I am shooting at f22 and I'm using a bulb exposure, so all I need to do is tap and then it will do the rest. Of course, the downside of doing these long exposures is that you do just have to spend a lot of time waiting for your camera to take its photo, and you don't really know at the end of that time whether you're going to have a good shot because you could have moved the camera slightly. There is a bit of a breeze, as you can see, quite a lot of a breeze now actually, and all those factors can mean that your shot is a little bit blurred, and if you're doing shots that take 2-3 minutes or more at a time, you're ending up wasting a lot of time just to see that the shot that you've got actually hasn't come out properly and you need to do it again, or you maybe need to reframe. Sometimes in a good location like this, I could take 20, 30, 40 photos quite comfortably, but when everyone is a long exposure that takes several minutes, you can't do that many because you just simply don't have time. The light is fading, it's already about 6:30, so I'm not going to have a lot of daylight left to use. So I'm hoping that the ones I'm getting are actually going to work. It does mean that it's really important that when you've taken your shot, you need to zoom in on those details and just make sure everything is nice and sharp, and it looks like it is, so I think I've got away with that little bit of wind. So I've actually just found a different composition. It's vertical this time, using this rock again as my foreground, and it's focusing much more on this central bit of the bridge. I've also taken off my 10 stop ND and I've replaced it with the Lee Filters Super Stopper. This is a 15 stop ND, so I'm going to be able to get a 4-minute exposure time. That's going to leave us with very, very blurred clouds, and I'm hoping it's going to look really cool in this shot. Only just realised now the light is falling on it just how dirty this lens is. I didn't give it a wipe before I started shooting. Man. Oh well, probably going to have like a soft focus to my images. I'm really bad at lens maintenance. I should look after my stuff. It is not cheap. So one thing we do have, which you might have noticed, is that because we've got such strong sunlight coming over this way, it's coming through this fence, casting a very, very harsh shadow right on our foreground. Not a problem, Photoshop can and will take care of that. Really is a cracking view. I mean, just look at that. Both the bridges in one shot. It's a tiny little tucked away location. I'm just sort of next to, I think this is a scout hut, and I'm really kind of tucked in between this bit of fence and this bit of fence. But I think when the light is right, as it is now, this is the best place to photograph the bridges. It's definitely these big concrete blocks that make this scene, particularly these ones that have got like this bit of ironwork sticking out, because the rest of the rocks all the way down are just standard like boulders that you'd expect to find on any beach, and particularly the way that they're positioned against the wall means that they're completely in shadow. But these ones here, they're a little bit higher and they stand out because of the fact that they're man-made, because they've got these sort of jagged angles. I think it makes really, really interesting foreground interest in a way that just the standard rocks I don't think would. Okay, 4 minutes. Well, safe to say something's gone horribly wrong around here. Something had gone very wrong. It actually looks like there's a lot of light leaking in, so I think I simply hadn't aligned my filter properly to stop light coming in behind it. It is a harsh lesson to always make sure you're taking the time to set your gear up properly. So it's a real shame that last shot didn't work, because I actually really like this angle. I really like just having this one block as the main foreground and then just following that line up, following that reflection of the bridge, and having this central bit as our main image. But now we've basically lost the clouds overhead, so we've got this big gap which is just empty, and we've only got these ones here. These ones aren't really moving all that much. As you can see in the last shot I've just taken, it's just a little bit of an empty blue sky with some clouds sort of in the middle of the frame. It's not that compelling anymore. We're also, as you can probably, well, maybe you can tell, maybe you can't, we're losing the light over there. It's behind these clouds. The sun is pretty much almost setting now. And we haven't got that nice light on the side of the bridges anymore. So I think I've pretty much got the best shots that I'm going to get here. So I think I'm going to pack up and take these shots over into Lightroom. So here we are in Lightroom, and this is got to be one of my favorite shots that I did from this shoot. I love the foreground that we've got with these big concrete blocks. I love the way that the clouds are zooming overhead. I think everything stands out really, really nicely. I think it's important to remember just how important being patient is when you're getting these kind of shots, because if we just have a look at this image, for example, the sun had gone very much behind those clouds as we were getting towards the end of the day, and as a result there's no light hitting this bridge, and as you can see it really just gets lost. It's just a big grey mess. It's not that interesting, and generally it's a very, very disappointing image. But it really is just only a few seconds later that that light comes back out and hits the bridge and lights it up, and that's what makes it really stand out. In this shot, I've got even closer to this this ironwork. I really, really like this image. But because it stands out so much, I think this also works really well as quite a high contrast black and white image. So I did do a black and white edit too. That looks like this. And I'm really not sure which one I prefer, this one or this one. I think probably the color, because we've just got these real punches of red and orange in it, which really stand out, but I do like it as a black and white as well. But let's actually go into the edit and kind of see what it is that I did to get there, because this is one of the images straight out of camera. I've done absolutely nothing to this at all. We can see before and after. One of the reasons why I really like this one is because we've got these clouds very much sort of following the line of the bridge itself. There's a lot going on, and I think it allows the bridge to really stand out. And again, we've got this foreground interest with the block, which I think brings it together as a really nice scene. So first of all, I'm just going to start off with my crop. I'm going to take it to a 4:5 because it's very tall at the moment, and there's a lot of kind of wasted ground down here where it's just dirt and a little bit of wasted blue sky. So by going to a 4:5, as you can see, it's really tightened things up. I can straighten it up against the horizon with the water and just move it up to about here. I think that looks better. Maybe just a touch higher. Something like that, I think looks good. I'm going to slightly increase the exposure I'm going to slightly up the shadows as well, because a lot of this shadow detail down here is getting very dark. So I just want to kind of bring some of that detail out a little bit more. Bring my highlights down. Slightly up the contrast just to +10. And I'm going to do the same actually with the clarity, because this is a shot that I think having that little bit of punch that you get from clarity, not too much. If you go too far, it gets very, very punchy, but something like +20, which is a lot more than I would usually use on landscapes. But I think that for this type of image, we've got that long exposure, and having that clarity just really helps bring out the details on the bridge against that blue sky. So I really think it works. Okay, the white balance. I think I might warm it up slightly. Or will I? No, I think I might leave it right there. What was it? It may have been exactly the same. I may not have touched it much. But the tint, I'm going to slightly bring down slightly into the greens. I'm also going to reduce the vibrance ever so slightly, but also increase the saturation. So I think that's starting to look a little bit better. But a lot of the color work is going to be done, as it often is with my photos, in the hue, saturation, and luminance panel. So I'm going to start off by grabbing that green slider and dragging that a little bit over to the left towards the yellows. We've got very sort of vivid emerald green grass down here, and I think it's just so vivid that it draws the eye slightly. So by kind of bringing that down into the yellows, it brings it against, it just allows it to kind of blend with the scene a little bit more. But I'm going to do the same with those yellows too, because they're a bit sickly green on the rock. So by bringing those down, it turns those yellows into more of a rich orange, and already you can see how much difference that has made. If we just go off and on, the concrete in particular has gone from sickly green into a nice evening sunset orange, which looks a lot nicer to my eye anyway. The oranges I'm going to bring down a little bit. Pay particular attention to the ironwork here, because before, again, it was quite a weak orange, but we just brought it down to make it nice, sort of rich, deep, rusty iron. It's really nice, but it hasn't really done anything else elsewhere in the scene, which is nice. Let's go over to our luminance. Let's just go back to our hue a second. I'm going to bring the blues down. Not loads, because it quickly will go green in the sky, as you can see. So just a little bit, because it's a little bit of a purpley royal blue at the moment, and what I want is to be a little bit more of a sort of a tealy cyan blue. I think something like that. Just a little bit, just -7 is enough. But I'm going to slightly increase the aquas just to kind of balance that out a little bit. And again, if we go before and after, you can see how that's really bringing those colors into, I think, a much nicer point. And again, we go over to our luminance. I'm going to bring the yellows up, because so much of the yellow is in this rock, and by bringing that up, it's allowing it to really stand out and really be part of our foreground. I'm going to do the same with the oranges, but what happens is, as you can see on the fourth bridge, as I'm pulsing that orange up and down, it's really kind of washing out the tones of the fourth bridge. Now that's fine, because what I'm going to do with that is raise the oranges. I'm going to bring down the reds, because that bridge is made up of orange and red. So by darkening down that red, maybe going to the hue and bringing it more, the red down into more of a rich sort of ruby red, it's emphasizing the red on the bridge. And again, we can do that with the saturation. Pump that up. So now that really stands out. That red is very, very visible against the blue in the background. Before, it was sort of lost as a bit of a, there was a bit of a greeny orange cast on there, which didn't look great. So now it really, really stands out in the scene. So that's looking a lot better already, I think. I'm going to go down to our camera calibration, and I'm going to grab this blue primary, and let's just see what happens if we start to pull it to the left. It goes very, very weird. So I don't like using it to that degree, but a little bit I think is going to be quite nice here. Again, -10, and we could maybe up that saturation ever so slightly. With the greens, I'm going to go slightly up, and I'm going to actually bring that down somewhere around -20, maybe a little bit. less, something around there. You know, actually I might leave that at 0. This very much is, as it often is with my photos and my editing, just a bit of trial and error. What I like to do is basically grab a slider, drag it one way, drag it the other, see what it does, and then find a balance that I'm happy with. I don't tend to set out with an idea in mind of exactly how I want an image to look. It is a little bit of playing around, experimenting. I've got a big cup of tea. That keeps me going. I can play around with the sliders in Lightroom for as long as I want until I feel like I've got a good shot. If we just turn the calibration off and back on, it's probably quite a subtle shift, but it is just shifting those colors a little bit more into an area that I'm quite happy with them. So I think at this point, that is everything I'm going to do in Lightroom, but I am going to take it over to Photoshop just to do the rest of the edit. So one of the big problems, of course, is this shadow. It's very, very obvious. It stands out and it does spoil the shot. So I want to get rid of that. I'm going to start off by duplicating the layer. And I'm going to get rid of it using the clone stamp tool. I'm going to take a clone reading from here, bring it up, line it up, and I'm literally just going to paint it away. It's a very, very simple way of getting rid of any problems you might have in your images. I'm going to do same again on this side, up here, take a reading, line it up, and then paint away. And I can keep on just going down like this. Take new readings from all over, kind of mixing it up, because you don't want it to be an obvious, just repeating pattern. So I find that the best way of doing this is to just keep on going over it again and again. It's easy when you've got a rough texture like concrete where there's no uniformity to it. So you can basically keep on doing this as much as you want. It's definitely not the neatest job that I've done before, but you get the idea. Using tools like that just allows you to very quickly kind of get rid of these shadows. I would do the same on the grasses down here, again, using the exact same tools. But the other thing that I did want to show you whilst we're in here, well, a couple of things actually, but we'll start off just by merging that layer down and just basically starting from scratch. While I have lined up my horizon to make sure that's straight, because of the fact that I'm using a wide angle lens, we've got a couple of distortion issues, and one of which is that these towers of the bridge are kind of leaning to the left. So what I want to do is just make sure that they are nice and straight. So I'm going to select all, I'm going to open up the transform tool, and I'm going to go to Skew. Now, the way to do this accurately is to drag in a ruler from the edge, plonk it there, and as I do, you can see just how much that tower is leaning to one side. It's not great. And same here. Again, it really is not lining up. It's easy enough to do. I'm going to drag this bottom corner. I'm just going to pull it out. And as I do, you can see now that this is lining up nicely. This is lining up nicely. Bring it in a little bit at the top. And that should be about it. And now we can go view, clear guides, off and on. And now those bridges are sticking up exactly as they should be. It looks a lot better already. The other problem with using such a wide angle lens is that it has made the bridges look a bit smaller in the frame than they otherwise should be. So what I'm going to do is slightly increase their size. And I'm going to do this quite easily just by getting the rectangular marquee tool, selecting this, and then going Control or Command T, and literally just make them slightly bigger in the frame. Just about there. But I want to make sure that the reflection here is still lining up with this, so that they haven't changed their position at all. I'm just going to move it slightly up as well. And I'm going to press OK. So we just have a look before and after. You can see the difference that has made, just slightly correct for that wide angle distortion that you'd get. It's not necessarily something that I would do with every image. It is a little bit fake, as it were, in just using Photoshop to kind of correct for these mistakes. I certainly wouldn't want to use it for things like mountains where you could make them look even more pointy just for the sake of that drama, but kind of correcting for that lens distortion here, I actually don't particularly mind. And as you can see, it's not a huge difference. It's just kind of bringing things back in line. But before we stop, we can see that there is quite a harsh line from where we've made that change. So I'm just going to bring up a layer mask. I'm I'm going to make sure that I've got black selected, and I can just paint with black. And we can just soften that line until it blends nice and neatly with the rest. So now you can turn it off and on, and you would never know that anything had changed, except for on the rock, of course, where I just realized that I've done something weird. Okay, let's just get this back. Oops, wrong one. There we go. So there we go. The bridges are standing tall, and they are much more in the right place, which is looking good. So what I'm going to do is just merge that down. So again, we're starting from a base layer, and at this point is when you can start doing a little bit more color toning. And I like doing my color toning in Photoshop because I get to work in layers. If I'm working in Lightroom and I wanted to say apply a preset, let's say this, you apply it and it just applies the whole thing. Whereas I really like what I've already done with the colors in Lightroom. So I don't want to undo that too much. So I'm going to duplicate this layer a couple of times, just like this. And on the top one, filter, camera raw filter. And now if I go to my presets, we can have a nice look through the different presets. I do like my Visco ones that give lovely kind of film looks to the shots. Ooh, I really like kind of the blues that this one puts in. But I like this one too. So, okay, let's start with A6 raw half. We can click OK and think, fine, yeah, I do like that, but it's a little bit too much. So this way I get to bring that opacity right down so it's not there at all. And then we can just start to build it up. And we can pulse it. We can go up and then we can go back down. And you can see exactly how much it's applying. So maybe I'm just going to go with 55%, about half. And then I can merge that back down, and then we can duplicate that layer again, and we can go back in, and I can apply another preset over the top. We can go back in, and maybe now I want to go with this one to add that blue in. But again, it's a little bit too much. So I'm going to grab that opacity slider, bring it down to maybe 60%-ish, 65. So it's just adding that little bit of blue in there. We can merge that down, and now there's before. And there's after. I do really like what that's done. It's added a little bit more punch. We've got a nice sort of vivid blue in that sky that stands out really nicely against the white clouds. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this looks overall, to be honest. So I'm going to press Control and S, save it. That's going to take it back into Lightroom. Here we are. So this was our before. This was it straight out of camera, very, very greeny. We've got the bridges leaning, and we've got that wide angle distortion where they just look a little bit small in the frame. And in the time spent in Photoshop, we've been able to correct for that, and we've been able to add some real punch with our presets, as well as getting rid of that shadow. Again, yeah, it doesn't look great, I admit, but I'm trying to keep things quick for the sake of the video. Spend a little bit more time and clean that up. Same with these grasses. I think I've done a much better job in this shot. So you can see that it has gone completely, although I just realized now, haven't done it on the beach, so I will make sure to do that. Unless I just can't be bothered, which is more likely, but maybe you should be if you really want to get the best from your images. But that does bring me to an end of this video. I do hope it has been helpful to see how I would go about taking long exposure photos just like these, and how I would take them from a raw file to a finished photo. If you have enjoyed this video, do please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.